People imagine recognition as something dramatic, a speech, an apology, someone finally saying the exact words you waited years to hear. That is not what happened with my father. What I remember most is the chair. Gray leather, slight tear near the left armrest, positioned beside the reception window on the 32nd floor of a building he did not realize belonged to my company. He was sitting there reading an industry magazine when I first saw him through the glass. Calm, patient, mildly curious. The receptionist had buzzed my assistant a minute earlier. "Your 11 o'clock is here." I almost said send him in immediately. Instead, I stood there longer than necessary with my office door half closed, watching the man who spent most of my 20s asking when I planned to stop experimenting and build something stable. My father believed in visible work. Steel-toed boots, time cards. Back pain earned honestly. I built software companies. To him that always sounded vaguely fictional. When I was 24, I tried explaining venture funding to him over dinner once. Halfway through, he nodded slowly and asked, "But what do you actually produce?" Not cruelly, genuinely. That somehow made it harder. Over time, I stopped explaining things. When my first company failed, he treated it like proof of concept. When the second one survived, he called it luck. When the third began growing fast enough to attract investors, I told my parents almost nothing about it, partly out of resentment, mostly out of exhaustion. At family gatherings, my younger brother's promotion at a regional bank received more celebration than anything happening in my life because everyone understood what his job meant. Mine existed somewhere between suspicion and abstraction. "Still doing the computer thing?" relatives would ask. I learned to smile professionally long before becoming a professional. Then, 3 years ago, my father's manufacturing business hit trouble. One supplier collapsed unexpectedly. A contract dispute followed. Cash flow tightened. Someone in his network referred him toward a logistics technology company that specialized in operational restructuring for mid-sized manufacturers. Mine. He did not know that when his office scheduled the meeting, my assistant realized immediately, of course. She walked into my office carefully, holding the intake folder. "Do you want me to reschedule this?" I remember looking at his company name printed neatly across the top page. For a second I considered it, not because I wanted revenge, because suddenly I was 14 again, holding report cards that somehow never counted as much as practical skills did in our house. Then my assistant said quietly, "He's already here." So I stood by the glass wall watching him wait. He looked older than I expected. Parents age gradually over the phone. In person it arrives all at once. When I finally opened the door, he glanced up politely first, assuming I was another employee. Then he froze. Not theatrically. His face simply lost its certainty for a moment. I watched recognition rearrange everything behind his eyes at once. The building, the staff greeting me in passing, the receptionist standing straighter when I entered the lobby, the name on the wall outside my office. He had apparently not connected to me. "Hi, Dad," I said. He stood too quickly. "I didn't realize." "I know." Silence stretched between us, not hostile, just exposed. I invited him inside. The strangest part was how formal we both became after that. He called me by my first name the way clients sometimes do when they are trying not to acknowledge hierarchy too directly. I explained restructuring timelines, risk exposure, vendor negotiations. He listened carefully, more carefully than he had ever listened to me before. At one point, my operations director entered with revised projections and asked whether I wanted legal to draft preliminary terms. My father looked at me then, not emotionally, professionally, like he was recalculating something fundamental. The meeting lasted almost 2 hours. We discussed inventory systems, labor costs, transportation inefficiencies, real things, concrete things. For the first time in my life, my father understood my work because he could finally see its effect on something he respected. That realization hurt more than I expected. Not because he doubted me before, because authority was apparently the translator he needed. We moved forward cautiously after that. No favors, no symbolic rescue. My company helped stabilize his operations because the numbers justified doing it. Lawyers reviewed everything. Contracts were negotiated normally. I insisted on that. He agreed without argument. Afterward, he started calling more often, sometimes about business, sometimes not. He began sending me articles about manufacturing technology with short messages underneath. Thought this might interest you. Saw your company mentioned here. Proud of what you built. That last one took him nearly 50 years to say. Even then, it arrived by text. Months later, I visited his factory during a quarterly review. The place smelled like machine oil and hot metal, exactly like it had when I was a kid waiting for him to finish shifts. Only now, employees greeted me differently. People paused when I spoke. Managers took notes. My father watched all of it quietly from across the production floor. At one point during the inspection, we approached a narrow walkway between two operating lines. Without thinking, he stepped aside slightly and motioned for me to go first. It was such a small gesture, almost invisible, but I recognized it immediately for what it was. Not surrender, not apology, acknowledgement. And somehow, after all those years, that was the part that stayed with me.